If you're a gardener, you might think you need a spade. Or do you? I'm going to talk to you today about no-dig gardening and possibly finding a different use for your spade. With no dig, you tend to find you get less weeds because your soil isn't disturbed. Good crops still, you still get good crops, and there is no back-breaking digging. It means we can have a little bit more time to enjoy our gardens whilst knowing that we're building a really healthy system in our soil. Here at Wisley, we've been no-dig gardening for a number of years now, including here in our World Food Garden, which has been open for a couple of years. We've already experienced having really great produce out of this process, but we're starting to learn much more about the wider benefits of not digging our soil. These include things like good water retention, carbon management, and also just developing a really good biodiverse layer of life in our soil. But more of that later. Let's go and have a look at how no-dig gardening really works. So we're out in the garden here at Wisley where we're creating some no-dig beds. Here before me you can see some of the ingredients that we're going to use. We're going to use some cardboard, but I should stress you don't always need cardboard, but we'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. The cardboard that we've got is stripped of its tape and its labels and staples, and it's not shiny or printed, so it needs to be brown cardboard. We've a barrow full of mulch, in this case it's compost. I've got some tools, I've got that trusty spade which I needed to fill my wheelbarrow with, a rake and some water, and again water you don't necessarily need. The site that we've got here we haven't done anything to, so we haven't dug it over first, obviously. We haven't lifted the turf, we haven't pulled the weeds out. It's just sort of fairly rough cut, and it's got a bit of mess and detritus there as well as the weeds. So all you need to do is lay out your cardboard. I've laid it down flat, I've overlapped the edges, so one piece onto another, so there isn't a gap in between them. And I've also wetted it, but some people wet it, some people don't. This just stops it flapping around, basically. It's going to get wet anyway eventually when it rains, and then it will rot down. So wet it or not, as per your preference, and then I've added on a layer of compost, probably about 2 or 3 inches. I've added a fairly thin layer of compost at the moment, and to be honest I'd be happy with that, but if I choose to add a bit more, what that will do is actually just suppress the weeds coming through a little bit more. So if I can I will, but I'm not going to panic if it's just a couple of inches. So now I've made my bed, I can plant some plants in it. So I've got some plants here, they're little mustard plants that I've grown in these plugs. With a small plant like this you'll see that you've got quite a small root run really, so literally you're almost just planting into that compost layer. So you probably can just even do it with your fingers, but make a little hole and in goes your plug, and there you go, you've planted into that first layer of compost. What then happens is that plant, as it roots out, it will get down to that layer where we put the cardboard, by which time the cardboard's rotted away quite a lot, plant keeps pushing its roots through and gets into the soil. If you're planting a plant that was a bit bigger and your no-dig bed is fairly new, you can absolutely make a little hole in that cardboard and plant directly into the soil so that root contact happens straight away. But either way, you've got options with smaller plants to grow on or bigger plants you can plant in straight away. Here we are at some big beds out in our garden here at Wisley. We're going to be trialling edible plants in here. I've got my spade again, which I'm not going to use for any digging. I'm going to use it for pointing, another use for a spade. This is an example of where we've created these beds, but we haven't used any cardboard. They're really big beds, so it would have taken us quite a lot of time to unpick the cardboard and do all that. So we've literally just put our mulch direct onto the grass and weeds. Some weeds have popped up through, and we've had to weed those out, but you can see from here that we've got a nice thick layer of mulch down on top of the soil. My spade is for scale only. The little trench round here is where we're putting some edging in. So, but yeah, nothing dug in the beds themselves. But that's the kind of depth of mulch that we've used when we've not used any cardboard. So once you've established your no-dig bed, how do you keep it going?
So here at RHS Bridgewater, we've implemented no-dig right across our site, all the way through Paradise Garden, all the way throughout the kitchen garden. We've obviously got different types of no-dig beds here, raised beds, but we treat them exactly the same, annually mulching, and I think really the produce speaks for itself. So we're going to be having a look at how to maintain a no-dig bed. One main thing that we really need to do with no-dig is to make sure that we're adding organic matter on a yearly basis. Ideally about 3 to 5 centimetres if we can. So we're going to have a look at some of the different mulches that we can add to this bed, and a lot of it will depend on what it's actually going to add to your soil and indeed what you're going to grow in these beds as well. So the first one, and one really popular one, readily available, is horse manure. You can get lots of different types of manures, chicken manure, cow manure. This one here is well rotted horse manure. Ideally, you want it certainly at least a year old, but ideally about 18 months to 2 years, so that all of the organic matter is really rotted down. This is a fantastic mulch because it adds lots of nutrients into the soil, particularly nitrogen. It's very nitrogen rich because of the bedding that the animals have been using. So this is a really super one if you want to grow kind of like leafy vegetables. Another one, we use composted bark in some places. Now mainly we use this actually as a top mulch, but this is just a really good example of something very similar to like leaf litter, which is a really easy thing that you can produce at home. Again, ideally leaf litter is just brought together, netted up so it's got lots of aeration to it, and kept in a place just out of the way, and again ideally for about 18 months to 2 years. Now this is actually quite low in nutrients, but what it does do, and I think you can see from it, is it adds fantastic organic matter into the soil, and that will really improve aeration and drainage and the structure of our soil. So we don't always have to just do one mulch, we can actually do a mix depending on what you want to grow. Our favourite one here at the moment is actually the compost that we're producing on site, which is fantastic. I think you can see from the beautiful dark colour to it, it's got, again, fantastic organic matter into it. This might be just a little bit woody for us at the moment, but this can continue to rot down and the wood will continue to do that. Again, it's going to bring fantastic aeration into the soil, but this is packed full of nutrients. So I really believe one of the best things that we can add into our soils, if you can, is actually home produced compost. If that's not possible, of course, there's lots of different composts in the market that you can buy. It can maybe get a little bit expensive if you're looking at large areas of no-dig. So the more that we can actually compost ourselves, the better. So we're going to add our home produced compost onto here. As we talked about, we want to just spread about a 3 to 5 centimetre mulch on top of the bed. Raised beds are really nice to work with because of the height. So we can literally do it with our hands. Get a nice layer, we're adding nutrients, we're adding organic matter, and we're adding really beneficial organisms and fungi into this raised bed. Really nice kind of even spread on there. And then we can spread that, make sure we're getting a nice thin spread, whether this is on a raised bed or a flat bed. Getting a really nice, even surface. If we've got some flat beds, you might want to get a little bit of a mound throughout the centre, so you're not actually having to have wooden sides to raised beds. We don't necessarily need to have sides to raised beds at all. We can have a nice little kind of mound in the centre, and it will do exactly the same thing. And putting this on in the autumn is a perfect time because it will allow, when we have the frosts, to get into there, break down the organic matter even more, and let the worms do the work and really take that down into the soil for us. One of the most important things about maintaining a no-dig bed is keeping it weed-free. Because we're not turning over the soil constantly, we're actually reducing the amount of weeds, so we're reducing the amount of work that we need to do. We've just cleared this bed here, ready for the winter. So all I'm going to do is keep a regular hoe, basically, to keep the small weed seeds down. By hoeing, what I'm doing is basically taking them off at the roots, leaving them on the surface to die, and the weather will do all the rest of the hard work for us. Just make sure we do this regularly. We'll also do this on our beds where we've got vegetable crops currently growing, such as brassicas, cabbages, broccoli, kale. They'll stand all the way through the winter. They'll feed us all the way throughout the winter, and we just need to make sure that we keep on top of the weeds, ready for them popping back up in the spring.
So let me quickly show you how we harvest the majority of our crops in the World Food Garden. So here we have a nice crop of beetroot. It's a cultivar called Boltardy, which is a lovely deep red one. So to harvest them, we just reach in and we grab hold of the leaves of the individual crop, and as we twist, beetroot comes out the ground. So if you look at this beetroot we've just harvested here, it doesn't have very many roots attached to it. That's because of the method we've used to harvest it. It would have had many more roots when it was growing to make sure it got all the water and the nutrients it needed. But by harvesting using this method, the majority of those have been left behind in the soil. The reason we do this is that when you pull a crop up, roots and all, you disturb the soil, not just where the crop was, but the soil around where the crop was growing. By leaving the fibrous roots intact, we don't disturb the soil, and therefore the beneficial soil organisms, the beneficial fungal associations remain intact and help to promote that healthy soil community. The only exception I might say to this is with something like chicory. If you leave the taproot of chicory in the ground, it will reshoot and start to regrow. Now this might not be a problem, you may well want the chickens, but if you don't want it to regrow, you do need to make sure the taproot of crops like chicory come out the ground. But in general, fibrous roots are absolutely fine to leave in the soil, and they're just extra organic matter that will rot down and help to feed the soil life.
So we've had a look at no-dig practices and how to implement no-dig, but the question is really, why does it matter? Soil is a really important part of the whole system on Earth. It has a thriving ecosystem that can help us to cycle nutrients, so it helps plants to grow, therefore us to thrive. It's the basis of all our food. And if we can nurture and cherish it, we'll find that we're able to store water, stop carbon from leaching out into the atmosphere, and all of the things that we know are real challenges for us at the moment. No-dig is definitely about much more than putting down our old friend the spade. The spade still has a place in gardening, and we do too. No-dig's about understanding how we fit into the system, thinking about how nature would like us to do things, and trying to act accordingly. And from that, we can have definitely happy, healthy gardens. We can enjoy really good, healthy food, and all of that can be sustainable and resilient for the future.